Please welcome Wrigley.
Hello, I'm Evan. This is Nico, and we're the co-founders of Wrigley. So just a quick show of hands. Who here has ever thought about mining Bitcoin? Okay, 5, 10, 15. Yeah, see a good number of hands. So me too. So I missed the early days, and I never got to mine on my own computer. But ever since I'd first learned about Bitcoin, I've always been fascinated by the mining process. So if we can go to the next slide. So in 2021, I started a pilot project to mine Bitcoin in Africa to sort of have mining pay for new energy assets. And I spent some time to find mining rigs. It was not easy to acquire them. And we went through the whole process of getting them shipped and getting them to, through customs. It's not easy. And when we finally got one live, the host actually said it was too loud, and then they turned it off. And so that did not work out. At this time, I had already mined to my mining pool account, and I was very excited to see Bitcoin hit my pool account. This was awesome. And so I wanted to go and do it again. So I bought a mining rig, and I went to a company we'd worked with in Texas, and I got it online, but long story short, it was only up for a day. And once it was online for a day, they said that, they turned it didn't work out, and I got rug pulled. So it turns out mining is very hard. Yeah. Go on.
Yeah. So yeah, Evan basically came to a quick realization that mining has some pretty serious barriers to entry. You have to first source the ASICs, which have a pretty steep upfront cost. Then not only do you have to get them to the actual site, but you have to keep them on, right? So instead of getting them fried like he had on the first day, you actually have to maintain those rigs. So for people that want to actually participate in mining, this usually leads them to having to use some kind of third party to outsource that whole process because they can't do it themselves, right? Now, that comes with its own host of problems because then you actually have to trust that third party to keep those machines on, right? And this is like, in Evan's experience, where people usually get rug pulled. And at that point, everyone pretty much gives up on mining. So the question is, okay, why should you care, right? Why not just leave it to somebody else whose professional job is to do this? So because mining is very costly and it's hard, it means that we end up having large players, giants really, like Bitmain, for example, that centralize the whole process, benefit from the economies of scale, and they have basically the vast majority of the manufacturing. They also have huge mining sites like this one all across the world. And finally, they also end up controlling most of the pools. So money in mining tends to flow up towards the manufacturer, which means that it's really easy for them to then consolidate. And this extends all the way down to the pool where they end up having control over transaction selection, right? So this is a graph that was posted on Twitter by Mononaut, where he traced the Coinbase transactions from these pools highlighted in purple and saw that all of these transactions were going to addresses that were controlled by one entity, right? So we had also 0x B10C did a similar analysis that posted on Twitter. Maybe you guys saw it, where he saw that all of the block templates from these different pools were the same, which means that the mining software that these pools are using is the same. And if you look at the numbers, this is about 47% of the network, and that means that all of these are basically proxies for Ampool and Bitmain. And just a reminder that to do a 51% attack, you don't actually need 51%. You can do it with around 33%. So this is bad, like really bad, because in a post-ETF world where we have all of this kind of political pressure mounting to bring Bitcoin into the mainstream, all it takes is one call or two calls from Uncle Joe or Janet Yellen or whoever to basically say, hey, we don't want these transactions included in the block, and well, there goes our censorship resistance, right? With a 51% attack, those miners can also double spend their funds, not everybody else's funds, but their funds, which nobody should have that power, even if it's not in their interest to do so. And finally, like we saw with SegWit, like Jihan basically blocked SegWit for a while. So with a 51% attack or with that much of the network, you can also block protocol changes. So mining by default tends to centralize, right? Because of these economies of scale. If we don't do something, like if we, like Bitcoiners, the people that buy, use, and like actually hold Bitcoin, don't do something, we will just continue down this black hole. And we have basically, if we stay down the current path, we go towards further centralization, which basically leads us to a centralized Bitcoin, which defeats the whole value prop and purpose in the first place, right? Or we can actually fight to try and get our permissionlessness and our censorship resistance back on track.
And so to build on what Nico's just pointed out for us here, so we need to decentralize mining. And so how do we do it? Well, hosting's not going to do it because it's too small scale and requires too much trust. Cloud mining, if we go to the next slide, it's just scam central. Like you can't. Cloud mining's not going to get us there either. And so there's the third path. What if you just allow other people, allow Bitcoiners to buy hash rate direct from mining farms? And so that's where Wrigley comes in. And so what Wrigley is we make real hash rate from mining farms. We source hash rate from mining farms, and we make it available directly to buyers. Now that hash rate, which would have been going to one pool account, can now go to multiple pools across different buyers. Now, one of the problems with Bitcoin, mining is, if you go and look at, there's always this issue of the mining rug pull. If we can go to the next slide. So with mining rug pulls, you need some way to prevent that. And so we have an escrow that uses multi-sig. So the funds are held on-chain, and they're only released to the sellers, to the mining farms, after the hash rate has been delivered. So this is a non-custodial approach that allows us to prevent the mining rug pull. And in terms of how you price it, well, you have to give the miner an incentive to send the hash rate direct to the buyer. And so you need an auction to allow price discovery so that there's an incentive, there's a price premium that the miner gets from the buyer in order to send the hash rate somewhere else. If we can go, yep. And this is what it looks like. So this is what an auction looks like. The hash rate is listed by speed, by seller, energy source, location. You can bid on it, and the bids are anonymous, and that's that's how it works.
So how does this work, right?
Yeah.
What are the incentives between buyers and sellers? And really, it turns out that it comes down to time preference. So buyers are Bitcoiners. Today they buy and hold Bitcoin. That's what we do as Bitcoiners. And that means that we have low time preference because we can afford to wait for price appreciation, right? But in the meantime, we don't want to lose the properties of freedom and privacy that also give Bitcoin its value. Now, miners, they sell their hash rate to pools usually according to the hash price, right? They have high time preference because they need to cover expensive electricity bills, right? So the other thing is that they basically what they want are better margins so they can cover scaling up their operations. That's the other big thing that they have to do. So here we can basically trade time preferences, right? Bitcoiners can pay a premium to miners. So by selling their hash rate at a premium, the miners get basically increase their revenue, right? And then while Bitcoiners pay for this premium today, they are basically paying to decentralize the network in the future, right? And that increases the value of that network as well. So not only are they basically paying for the decentralization, they're also paying for this privacy component, and where they can send their hash rate to different pools. They can push Stratum v2 adoption. And yeah, this basically comes back to Satoshi's original vision for proof of work. That is, determining decision making. Basically, how do you determine representation and decision making? And that's according to one CPU, one vote. And in order to get basically this equality back, we need to give hash power back to the people, right? So here you can basically go to our website and you can start mining with Stratum v2 using the first pool implementation from Stratum v2 by Demand Pool, which is our friends Alejandro and Filippo over here. And yeah, we hope you'll join us to try and decentralize the network. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, how cool that people are working on the biggest problem of Bitcoin, just like a centralization of mining, for example. But now, the toughest part. Judges, it's your turn.
Well, what's your business model?
Yeah. So we sell hash rate at a premium at auction to buyers, Bitcoiners who bid on it at auction, and we take a marketplace fee in the process.
Is there a risk that malicious miners withhold valid hashes? And if there is, how do you make sure that the hash rate that the users are buying is like an average probability proper hash rate?
You want to take that?
Sure. Yeah. So we have an accounting system. We route the hash rate through our proxy, and that's how we account for the actual hash rate. So we hold the funds in multisig. We count basically all the shares over Stratum that are delivered to the buyer. If all of the shares that were stipulated in the agreement or all of the hash rate that was stipulated in the agreement wasn't delivered, then we reimburse the buyer out of that multisig. So we do that accounting basically by just counting Stratum shares.
But could it be that the miner is sending you the hash rate that does not have valid hashes and sending only the valid hashes to another pool, for example, to get rewards there?
Well,
Withholding attack, yeah.
Well, you have to connect to the pool on the buyer's side, right? So the miner sends the hash rate to the buyer's pool account, then you have the handshake basically with the pool, and you can't spoof the pool, right? It's physically impossible to send to have two different sets of work for the miner to be working on at the same time, because those would require two different pool connections, and well, you have to hash over one of the two. You can't do both at the same time. Does that make sense?
How much work have you put into the regulatory aspects of this? So you mentioned on one slide you think you're not a money transmitter. Things that come to mind are like exchange-related regulations if you're matching buyers and sellers, or securities laws stuff if you're promising returns to investors. How much work have you done on that universe of potential issues, and how are you thinking about it?
Yeah, sure. So well, we've talked quite a bit with our lawyer about what is hash rate basically, and how does that actually end up factoring into the legal question. We treat hash rate as a compute resource in the same way that AWS is a compute resource, right? So we don't think that hash rate, according to our lawyer's view, is a security in that sense. There's no real expectation of profit here as well. There isn't a common enterprise, because it's not like we're one company that's selling our hash rate to a bunch of other people. We're just basically bridging two different parties in a transaction. In terms of brokerage, well, again, we would be a brokerage as much as anybody who sells goods and services is a broker, right? But we're not brokering digital assets and that kind of traditional framework. It's not like we're taking tokens, one type of token and giving it for another. So we think we're well insulated from some of those regulatory risks. Obviously, it's a conversation that we would have to have with regulators, and we have talked about that with Evan. Still more work to be done, but as far as the conversations we've had with our lawyer, we think we're in a good position.
Yeah.
Can I just follow up and I guess push the reasoning there a bit further? I guess I'm with you, completely unqualified, but nonetheless with you on it not being a security. Is there a risk that the way this marketplace is structured means that what you are selling is still a future?
I can take that one. For the moment, we're a spot marketplace, so you're just buying hash rate literally at the spot, at the instant hash rate price. There's no concept of, early on in the project, we did experiment with so-called forwards, so buying hash rate and then having forward delivery of it months down the road. That has some, that's harder to pull off, so we're going to revisit that later on. Yeah.
So how are you guys thinking about this in terms of substitute products with hosted and cloud solutions? I mean, have you backed into economics and from the customer standpoint, if they don't care about systemic risks in the network and they're thinking about it purely from an economic standpoint, how would they think about this solution?
So from a purely economic standpoint, you can make the argument that you can buy hash rate, sort of using the price of the hash rate in Bitcoin as it would be priced in fiat. And then you can look at the amount of Bitcoin you mine and then look at it down the road, and you can possibly turn a profit in fiat terms, and if not necessarily in Bitcoin terms. What we've seen from the marketplace thus far is that buyers are willing to pay a 10 to 20% premium for that hash rate for that sort of KYC-free privacy benefit. And that's one of the main drivers on the marketplace today. We feel long-term, this market for the decentralization and the long-term win for Bitcoin will be a larger part of the buyer side.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful. And then, so with the marketplace, where are you guys at with it today? How much volume is this producing and all that? We list
a few petahash per week. So we're iterating and kind of getting a lot of feedback from buyers. We have a small community of about call it 100 active bidders that give us feedback, and we're kind of at the point where we're ready to scale up.
And how would you plan on doing that?
So to scale it up, do you want to take that, Nico?
Yeah, I mean, the idea is to start trying to put the product in front of as many people as possible through your regular kind of Bitcoin distribution channels, places like Nostr, Twitter, Bitcoin Talk. We would like to do a signature campaign on Bitcoin Talk as one of our kind of next steps. Content marketing around miner centralization as a problem. Pushing that, kind of across the major communication channels. We have yet to kind of do that big push because we have this, the chicken and the egg of making a market where, you need to have enough sellers on board to then be able to go around and field that to buyers. We just finished a big overhaul of our back end where we now have brought the proxy server in-house. We were using a third party. That third party was charging us a premium, so now we can, kind of own that whole part of the stack ourselves. And we're basically finishing out now what is the seller portal so that we can take hash rate from sellers, point it back to their pool account, and then only switch from their pool account to buyers when the buyer appears to fetch them the premium. After the order's been completed, we switch it back to the seller. Yeah. So that kind of solves the chicken and the egg that then we can turn around and go field this or take it to market.
Yeah. So how are you getting sellers to participate in this seller portal, which you're saying isn't complete yet?
Yeah, so we have a few sellers that we've worked with, like larger mining farms that we know. I've worked in mining for a few years and have been kind of through personal connections. It's very easy to pitch them because they're like, oh, I get 4% premium. Sure, I don't have to pay my pool fee and you're giving me 4% on top. That's usually a 5% margin just locked in for them. And mining is all in the margins, so it's an easy sell.
So to bootstrap it, we pay a fixed premium, which right now is 5%. So we bootstrap it with a premium over the FPPS hash price. And then as we scale up the buy side, we feel that the sellers are going to be more encouraged to take that premium directly.
So, oh, another question. Last one, please.
I was just going to say I like the idea of trying to create some virality with the centralization of mining, the social aspects of it, and creating marketing around that. It's a great idea.
Yeah, thank you.